Hey guys, so in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Docan Panda battery. This is a 32 kilowatt hour battery, so it is massive. It's the equivalent to 6 rack batteries, essentially, so a full cabinet of rack batteries. And how they've done that, they've paralleled two 16S battery packs, so those are 314 amp hour cells in there, and they've put both of them in there and paralleled them together to equal that 32 kilowatt hours. Which means there is 32 314 amp hour CALB cells in here. And those are actually nice cells. You actually don't hear much about them anymore. A few years back, you'd hear a lot more, but now you hear mostly about EVE or REPT cells. But yeah, CALB has been around for quite some time. And if you guys saw my last video on the other Docan battery, I just reviewed the Noon battery. That had a Darren BMS. This has a KS BMS in it, which stands for Kishang or Kishang. I hope I'm saying it right. Anyway, I hadn't heard of that BMS before. So I hadn't heard of the Darren BMS or the KS BMS. So Docan's actually using some different BMSs than I'm used to. And when we pop it open, you guys can see it inside there. And you also see what they are using for an active balancer as well. This has a 2 amp active balancer in it. The BMS is capable of outputting and charging at 200 amps. Which could potentially create some limitations for people because this is such a large battery, and I'll discuss that later in the video towards the end. Comes with a really nice screen there, really nice graphics. Yeah, as you guys may know, I guess it depends on how long you've been watching the channel, I'm a big fan of screens and the different layouts, and they did a really good job with this. The Noon battery wasn't bad, but there was a lot of kind of empty space. But yeah, they do a good job with this screen. And this works with essentially any kind of inverter you could have on the market now. Solarc, EG4, SRNE, all those. And you can change the protocols really easily on the screen. It also has a Bluetooth option. Not a big fan of their Bluetooth app. It's kind of stinky. I'll show you that. And they have a Wi-Fi option also. I haven't even messed with that. And one of the biggest features about this battery, or one of the most newsworthy things about it, is not just the fact that it's a huge capacity, but the fact that the price is so low. And I'll put the price here on the screen that it is while I'm recording this. It usually hovers right around that 24 to 2600 range. They've got a new batch coming out, actually. I don't know if they're on the way already, but they've got some slight differences. I'll talk about that later too. But yeah, at that price, that is crazy low. I'm hoping to see good things when we pop this open. So even factoring in delivery, you are less than $100 per kilowatt hour on this battery, which is, again, that's crazy. But I think it's worth mentioning that the delivery could vary by state. Man, there were so many people that commented on that last video I did on the Noon battery about the delivery. Some states were $500, some were $300. I usually don't talk about delivery in any of my videos because I just never know what state people are in. I don't know what kind of specials they're running on delivery. But yeah, this should be around $300 to $500. Delivery, depending on what state you're in. So yeah, you might be a bit less than $3,000. And then if you factor in that tax credit, if you guys get this before the end of the year, it's a low price to begin with, but it was really low at that point. So again, hoping for good things inside. But I should mention that this BMS does come with all the basic protection, which is overcurrent, undercurrent, overvoltage, undervoltage, and then they have temperature protection as well, so that's high and low. The BMS also comes with the capability, if you hook more of these in parallel and hook communication cables between these batteries, so if you're going to get more than one, then the master screen can show all of the details of all the batteries. So it's really nice that way. And granted, you can do that on Wi-Fi as well. But yeah, if you guys are there in front of the battery and you hook to the master battery, or if you go over and look at the master battery, you can see what's going on with any of the packs that are hooked to it. So I hope that covers all the basics before I get started on showing the exterior, and I'll measure it for you guys also. If that doesn't cover it, then hopefully I will remember as I go along. All right, so size of the battery. Let's check some measurements out first. So 27 inches tall, length is 31.5 inches, depth 17 inches. So pretty compact considering the amount of storage you have. The display on this is pretty sharp. You're going to see most of the basic stuff you would want to see on a display. And they take up the entire display here. Unlike the Noon battery, it does leave some empty space on the side. This one here is going to show you pretty much anything you're going to need to know on the battery itself. And you can look at the Bluetooth app also. Cell voltages, yeah, the basics. It also has a dark theme if you guys are into that, so you can change themes. I don't see anything in here. Oh yeah, there we go. So there's the protocols. So you can change all the basic protocols on here also. It's set to Victron, which is interesting on Canon Protocol to begin with, but Pylon Tech is going to be probably the most widely used. It also has Lux Power down here at the bottom. And over here would be considered the business end of things. Down below is a bunch of specs that you're going to find in the manual online either way. And then right here we have our different connections. So 2 positives, 2 negatives. They did send, and we'll see what they sent with it here in a minute. They sent a set of parallel cables and also a pair of cables to connect to your inverter. As you guys can see, this has those quick disconnect things we've seen on other batteries. Different brand names, though. This one here, I believe, are Dexon, but I'm not quite sure. I'll look at the connectors. These can be good and bad, and I'll discuss that here in a minute when I show you the wires they sent with it. And then we have a 125 amp breaker. This is doubled, so it's technically a 250 amp breaker here with a shunt, which is nice. Then down below, stuff we'll typically see on a battery. We've got our dip switches, dry contacts, RS-45 CAN, 232, and then here is where you would parallel your communication cables to other batteries of the same type. And I believe right here is the antenna for Wi-Fi / Bluetooth. So that's nice of them to put that on the exterior of the case because that can really deaden the signal if you've got it on the interior. And I've had some other batteries I've reviewed that are like that. You know, you get 5 feet away from them and you can't get a signal anymore. All right, so what comes with it? So first we've got a communication cable you can hook between laptop and the inverter. And then we've got this one here that you can actually splice in, likely because they have Victron protocol on there, and Victron just chooses to be oddball. So they've got a different pin out on there, so you can make your own here with this cable. And this is a parallel communication cable between the 2 batteries. If you're going to buy multiple batteries here, you can hook this into the parallel. And then any standard Ethernet cable, if you get it on Amazon, they don't have a cable from battery to inverter, although you technically could use this. It's just kind of short for that. But you can buy any standard Cat5 cable or above to hook to your inverter from this battery. So here's kind of the downside to those quick disconnects. So in one sense, they're nice. They're clean connection. If you hear it click, basically you've always got a good connection, which I'm a fan of that. However, it also means you're kind of hemmed in with whatever cable size you've got or what they send you. And they can be a little bit more difficult to source if you want to make your own cable. And then the head, actually, the size of the head is dependent on how big the cable is. So technically, I don't know. Anyway, that one might go up high enough, but here they send 3-gauge, 200 degrees Celsius cables to parallel battery to battery. So these are going to be rated for right around 140 to 150 amps. Now we have, as I mentioned in the beginning, we have a 200 amp BMS in this battery here. So that's the potential we could have. Flowing between the batteries depends on the size of your system. This might be adequate, but from the battery to inverter, this is not adequate. So right at 140 to 150 amps, and you've got a potential of 200 amps that's going to come out of this, then really it's not enough. So it looked like to me online that they're going to be sending, and I'll get with Docan, so I will put that in the video at the end of the video or somewhere in. But it looked to me like they're going to be switching, instead of the quick disconnects, to just a standard terminal like they had on the Noon battery, if you guys saw that review on that. So you could basically put any size cable you want. So the downside of that is you have to buy your own cables, and it's nice of them to include some cables with it. But yeah, these are just undersized. All right, and now the moment that you've all been waiting for, or some of you, or a small portion of you, have been waiting on. We're going to open this battery up and see what it looks like inside. Not a good start, though. This is already stripped right here, this one little screw. Let's see if we can get it out. Oh, that did not look good. Huh. All right, so looking at the interior of the battery. So this is the BMS they were describing. I talked about in the beginning, the Qisheng BMS. We have, I pulled this back already, but we have 4 and 4. These are 8-gauge, 200 degrees Celsius wires on the negative side. On the noon battery, we had a JK balancer. I didn't even mention that in the video. This I do not recognize. I'll see if I can find the name of it on here. According to them, it's a 2 amp active balancer. Oh, it's their own balancer too. Here, let me show you. So it is a KS16S balancer. And then here's what we have on the BMS, 200 amp BMS. Wire management could be better, honestly. Like their main leads actually look good. They've got insulation on all of them. Again, the main battery leads look great. They've got it in on this clip, so it's bolted into here. That way they didn't have to deal with any odd ferrules or anything like that to be able to crimp it into the breaker. They put this nice heavy bus bar clip in here first and then bolted to that. That's nice and clean, but check out all of the distinct, or the individual, wire leads here. It's just a rat's nest. I mean, I've seen worse. I definitely have seen worse. And these have insulation on them. And don't get me wrong, we're not talking about something here that is going to fray or cause a problem, because they've got wire jackets, insulation on anything that really matters, it looks like. I don't know. In my opinion, you should be able to bundle everything together and spend a little more time on it. And it makes an impression for people that crack this open. Onto the battery itself, though, I do like the fact that they have this standoff to get the BMS off of the battery. That way it doesn't retain any heat. I do like the fact that they protected all of their wire leads, like I said before. This is a 16S battery stacked on top of another 16S battery, like I mentioned in the beginning. And you can see right down below here, there's a bracket down there. And that's where it ends, the first one. And then you're going to have a whole other one beyond that. So these are paralleled together. And they're using these cables to parallel the two packs together. Yeah, it's just really hard battery to get into. I wish it were built sort of more like the Noon battery, where I could just slide the whole case off, but it's not. These brackets were set down inside of the case and then screwed down. So I can't really get a good look at the cells. We do see that we have laser welded bus bars. They have the bevel on them here. We also have a bolt holding here. So this is not soldered. These are screwed in, actually. You can just make out a screw here. So the balance leads are screwed on, which I prefer that over a soldered joint. And then here, I'm assuming there's probably two more temperature sensors on the bottom, but we have two temperature sensors right here. And we've seen this before too, where they're using generic bus bars. So right here, you've got balance leads. All the balance leads are led through this channel too, which I like. They've got the shielding on them, like I mentioned before, and then they're put through this channel here so nothing gets pinched. And they've got small little notches here to be able to send them out when needed. But then over here, what I was about to say, as far as universal bus bars, they've got a threaded one here, but you can see there's no balance lead needed on this end because that's the end of the run. And then the main positive comes out here. So yeah, they just reuse these. They flip them. Over here it's needed. Over here it's not. Unfortunately, I can't see much more of the pack itself. They've got it surrounded with this resin board. They've got resin board on top before they put the BMS on. And the next pack would be built the exact same way. I'll show you on the side here. You can see down below more of the same board. They've got this bracket, and then they just rebuilt the exact same pack again. Yeah, if I were judging the wiring based solely off of this, I actually like this. They've got everything running through a dedicated channel. Everything's clean right here. It's basically just over there that kind of made me cringe. So I could not get a clear view of this. It looked like 4 gauge to me, but I kept trying to strip it back and I could just see a bit of a number on it. So I eventually took this off here. So this is where the feed would come from the main breaker through to the main positive right there. And you can see that comes off of the pack down below. So the pack goes into the bottom of the breaker here, comes out right here when you switch the breaker on off, and then it'll come to the main positive terminals right there. So it turns out it is 2 gauge, 200 degree Celsius wire. So that's actually what you're going to see on all these main runs right here. That's actually pushing the limits with the 200 amp BMS. So yeah, in my opinion, most times you'll see batteries that are larger like this and they're running a 200 amp BMS. They're going to want to go with 2 4-gauge. So you'd figure that's just going to be exactly half of this as a 4-gauge, but not quite. So if you go with 2 4-gauge, you're going to be well over 250 that you can run easily, 250 amps. So in my opinion, they should have gone with, if they're after 200 amps continuous, they should have gone with 2 4-gauge cables. Yeah, and that's where, just to clarify, that's where it came from right there. So that is the main positive coming out of the breaker down into the main terminals right here for the positive. Another downside to these type of connections is I can't hook a charge inverter straight to this battery to charge it up. So I have to rig up something like this. So I ran the cables that they sent with it to these bus bars and the charge inverter to here. So this is going to act as a splice, almost in a way, between the battery and the charge inverter. I could technically hook another charge inverter here too, so I could have both of them running at the same time and get right around, it'd probably get right around 180 amps or something like that. But this will get me up there. So now I'm going to put these covers on. That way you guys don't think I'm giving you a bad example. And then I will turn the charge inverter on. We'll get this thing fired up. Man, how cool is that? That's space age looking right there, isn't it? That LED. That's pretty neat. So it shows charge inverter's putting in 90 amps. I don't think it's completely maxed out yet. I can hear it still winding up. So we might get around 96, 97 amps going into it. And it's going to be a while. We're at 47% state of charge. So yeah, this is going to be pumping for quite a while to fill this battery up. Just to show you guys, the charge inverter is charging at 93 amps, it says. And on our meter, it is agreeing. We're saying we're putting 93 amps into the battery. But the BMS is showing right at 90 amps. So the internal shunt in this BMS might be a little off. Actually, that's more than a little off. That's quite a bit in terms of amperage readings for a BMS. That could create some complications down the road, but at the very least, you're not going to get a very accurate state of charge here. So, especially when it's charging at that rate, it might do better once it hits its maximum voltage, but probably not. It should be showing an accurate current reading right here, or at least closer. All right, I got impatient and I hooked both charge inverters up. You can see the Star Trek light is nearly full now. So that is a nice meter. It's pretty accurate too, as far as it's saying it's 82%. Anyway, we've got 176, right around almost 177 amps according to the BMS here. Let's go check the gauge. So the meter is saying 183. So yeah, I think the spread gets bigger the higher the amount of amperage you're putting into it or taking out. So yeah, I'd trust the Fluke over anything else. So I don't know why, but that BMS is a smidge off. We'll see how well it tests on a capacity test. It's nearly finished charging, but I'm going to check the communication while I'm doing this. So go into protocol, and I've already switched it to Lux Power. And then I'll hook into the CAN port, and we'll check it on the 12,000 XP. All right, I've got a long Ethernet cable here, so I'm going to hook it in where it's at. And then I'll go over to the 12,000 XP. I've got like a 50-foot cord. You can see I've got this little cord hooked to the end of the 50-foot cord. We'll hook it into the battery communication. And this is right around where my microphone blanked out. But you can see right there, it's 99% state of charge. It is communicating fine with the EG4 12,000 XP. Also did really good in the capacity test. We got 649.3 amp hours out of a 628 amp hour battery. All right, guys, so final thoughts on the battery here. So first, I didn't mention in the beginning, but the packaging was not sufficient. When the battery arrived, the casters were actually popped through the bottom of the pallet because the wood that they had this sitting on was so thin. So you got a 600-pound battery and just a little thin bit of plywood underneath it, and so it just wasn't enough. So the battery actually popped through, and it took quite a bit of work to get it out. If I hadn't had my machine to lift it out, because I could not lift the thing out myself, I tried and tried but couldn't do it. So yeah, I would have had to cut the wood, or I don't know what I would have had done, but lifting it up by the straps was enough, and then I just kicked the pallet off. But yeah, I contacted Docan, and they said they are already reinforcing the bottom for the newer Panda batteries. So that shouldn't be an issue for any of the batteries coming up. So I'm trying to go over all the cons. So next would be wire size. So it's not actually super rare that people don't send the correct size cables for the batteries. But yeah, these 3-gauge cables are too small. But the fact that they're that quick disconnect makes it a little bit more irritating because you can't just put a different cable on it yourself. You have to buy the fitting. I actually saw somebody on the forum source these, and they're on Amazon. So they weren't too pricey. I haven't sized them or looked at them myself, but it looks like you can fit around a 1-gauge wire on there. So you could get those, and that would be fine. If you're going to run more than one of these, then you're definitely going to want to have some kind of other system involved. So probably a central bus bar. You could run 2 of these to that, and then to your inverters or inverter. I don't know what kind of inverter you have, but that would be fine. Really what I would do, let me get it. I would probably just use the cable that they send with it, which is 3-gauge, and then I would use the parallel cables that they give, which are also too small, and I would cut the head off, put a ring terminal on, and crimp a ring terminal onto it, and then put that into a central bus bar. With both of these combined, you'd be fine to run that to a central bus bar system, and there'd be no issue with overheating. I ran around, I think it was 160 amps through this with the charge inverters when I was getting ready to charge it up for the capacity test, and they definitely did get warm. Might have been 180. I'll have to look. The next thing would be the wiring inside. I let Docan know about kind of that messy look that I saw in there with the comms cables. They said they're going to try to clean that up, although I think they already have. They showed me some of the next version coming out. They showed the inside of them, and it does look cleaner than the wiring in mine here. I just told them it would be nice to have everything kind of planned out. It kind of looked like, okay, now we've got the bulk of the battery in. Let's just run the comms cables any way we want. And not that that's going to create a huge issue, but use some zip ties, run some channel or something. Just make it a little nicer. The last bit on that is the next version of this comes with M8 terminals instead of the quick disconnects. So those people could just put any size cable they want on there. And that's fine for me, especially at the price point of this battery. I wouldn't mind putting my own 2-aught cable on there. So you can make your own parallel cables. You can make your own cables going to the inverters. So that's a lot better in my opinion. Then the 2-gauge cable we have on those main runs, in my opinion, like I said, I think you'd be better off with 2 4-gauge cable. On the other hand, if you look on the BMS here on the screen, actually, did it turn off? I'll show a picture on the screen, but they've got it kind of conservatively set, the BMS. So it's 160 amps of charging and 180 amps of discharge that they have it set to. So in that sense, it's sort of sized for what they've got inside of the battery here. Although I'm not familiar with the BMS, like I said, so it could be they just want to stay below that 200 amps. But I think it also should be a 300 amp BMS. I let them know that too. But a battery this size should be able to discharge at 300 amps. Because it's a 48 volt battery, it's a 600 amp hour battery. So discharging at 300 amps, I don't like to go too high on my C rates, but that should be just fine for those people that need to push more wattage. I think a lot of people have 12,000 watt inverters. And with a 12,000 watt inverter, you need to be able to discharge at 250 amps from your battery at any given time. And this can only discharge at a max, even if I didn't fiddle with how to change that BMS discharge limit. But let's say it did go up to 200 amps. That would give you around 10,000 watts of output. So for somebody using a 6,000 watt inverter, that's perfect, but that's sort of the sweet spot. But when you get up a little higher here, then it's really not going to be able to run as much as the size of the battery should be able to. So it's more like a tortoise, really, instead of a panda, in my opinion, in that sense anyway, where it's just going to move slowly, but it'll live a long time. I know that's sort of corny, but this is not going to discharge, I think, at the rate it should be able to. Although you could argue the fact that the price is so low that you could just get 2, parallel them, and you'll be able to do near 400 amps of discharge. But yeah, you could argue that fact. I mean, the fact that they're so cheap, they're in the $2,000 something range each. They're in the $2,600 range each. And you could get 2 of them for $5,000 and some change with shipping and be able to have 64 kilowatt hours of storage. And then you could discharge at pretty much anything you needed for most households anyway. Some people do have 2 12,000 XPs, 2 12,000 watt inverters. So they're going to need a bit more discharge. So as far as cons, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. If you guys needed more discharge, then either get a second one of these. Although, if you guys saw the video I saw on the Noon battery, it's half this capacity, but it can also discharge at 200 amps. So you could say if you needed that higher discharge rate, but the same capacity, two of the Noon batteries might be a better option. But to me, I'm really into these large capacity batteries too. So yeah, there's a give and take, I guess. All right, last small thing in the cons is the screen is a little slow. So when you first start the screen up, you first tap it and it's been blanked out. It takes a good 3, 4, 5 seconds to catch up to its present day values. I know that's a small thing, but I figured I'd throw that in there too. So pros, I'm going to throw the price out first again because I think it is just so extremely low for the amount of capacity that you can get here. That's absolutely crazy that you can get for less than $3,000, you can get 32 kilowatt hours of storage. Again, I'm not assuming what your delivery costs are to your state. You can always go get it, and then there's no cost for delivery at all in Texas. The next positive would be the screen. I really do like this display. I like this too. I like the LED light. I like what it looked like when it's charging, that it looks kind of like Knight Rider when it when it's charging up there. I like that whole thing there. I do like the screen, even though, like I mentioned, it's a little laggy. I do like the display and being able to change it into dark mode if you want. These are small things, but it is a nice display. Another plus is the fact that it moves around easily on the floor. The casters are nice. Even though this is a 600-pound unit, it takes very little effort to get it to move around on the floor, and it is not top heavy, so it doesn't tip around or anything like that, so you don't get the sense that the thing's going to tip over on you because it's got a nice wide footprint. Didn't mess with the Wi-Fi yet at all, but it's a good option for people, especially for people that don't have a very smart inverter and they still want to check on their capacity when they're out of town. They can do it just directly to the battery. Then I'm glad they did include the Bluetooth. Like I mentioned before, pretty rudimentary, but it's nice to have that in there also. All right, guys, so I'm going to wrap it up with that. I'll leave a link in the description below to this battery here. If you have any questions at all, just let me know in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching, and stay tuned.